Despite the fact that we are constantly bombarded with the narrative that our governments are attempting to take action against immigration, the reality is that not just the UK, but the EU, and in fact the entire Western world, which has been suffering or facing depopulation due to sub-replacement fertility for years, are actually encouraging this high degree of immigration. To give you an idea of the actual figures arriving in the UK, you need only take a look at the Office for National Statistics. This is on their website. In 2022, there were estimated to have been around 1.2 million long-term migrants arriving in the UK. And there was around 557,000 people leaving the UK, of which only a small portion were people who were migrants, immigrants, returning home. A large portion of those was British people, but they don't offer a clear and defined breakdown of the figures. So although we are bombarded constantly with the figure of net migration, which is intended to deceive and mislead people on the true figure, there were nevertheless 1.2 million people arriving in the UK, of which 925,000 were non-EU nationals, followed by 151,000 who were EU nationals, followed by just 88,000 who were British. These are significant figures. So while we have been misdirected, or our attention has been focused on a comparatively minimal number arriving by boats that the government could stop immediately, but they don't, because they allow that to be a crisis so that we can focus on what we perceive to be a crisis, which is one that they have created and exacerbated by their actions, which every time they take in a migrant and place that migrant in a hotel, they then encourage hundreds or thousands or millions more to arrive here and take liberties at the expense of the resident population. Migration is only going to increase worldwide over the next few years because the UK, the EU and the US are not the only nations suffering or facing depopulation due to sub-replacement fertility. This is something that obviously has affected Japan to the point where Japan is now secretly making plans to open its doors to migrants. South Korea, but surprisingly enough, the one that is facing the greatest battle with depopulation over the next few decades is China, whose population is on target to fall by many millions by 2050 and to just over half of what it is now by the end of the century. And once these countries begin to take in migrants, then there will be an international competition for migrants, with each country trying to source the migrants that suit its economy, because not all migrants are equal. The best migrants of all are those who have been educated in their home nation to a high standard, who will then arrive in the host nation, take a highly paid job and begin paying tax from day one. The worst form of migrants are those who are neither educated nor integrated, nor has the will or the aptitude to integrate, and simply becomes a burden to the host nation, something that has seriously affected Germany since 2015, because Germany has now saddled itself with millions of non-productive migrants that are not only a burden to the nation financially, but they are also a strain socially, because they do not integrate. They have created social tension, crime, and the rest you know. One of the reasons that it's so important that countries actually reinforce their borders and their control of their borders is that the effects of sub-replacement, fertility and depopulation are not working evenly throughout the world. Some countries are still increasing, but their trajectory will be downwards. It is purely the momentum of the past that is defining their current growth, but they will invariably begin to shrink as well, whilst there are other countries, mainly in Africa, that do have a few more decades before they peak. And here's an example. Nigeria, a nation that went from 100 million to over 200 million in a couple of decades, last year, a nation with a population of 210 million had 7.9 million births. The EU and the USA combined, with a population of 776 million, only had 7.4. Nigeria had more births last year than the entire continent of Europe and the USA combined. Let that sink in. Even now, there is a pecking order where migrants are concerned, and it's not always as straightforward as it seems. For example, nurses from Ukraine and Poland may go to Sweden to work because they will have a higher standard of living, and yet up to 1/3 of Swedish nurses choose to work in Norway, where they will have a higher standard of living. And whilst the Anglophone nations will always be the preferred ultimate destination for migrants, unfortunately, due to bad planning, bad tax rules that have made the UK far less attractive to the educated, high earning migrant, the US is winning here, because the US is literally cherry picking the best of the best. And yes, they are also dealing with many migrants who are making their way into the country illegally. At the same time, from a productivity point of view, they are in a position to take the best of the best. So what Europe and the UK needs to do is to ensure that they reinforce their position of being able to decide who does enter our country and who does not enter our country, and to ensure that the economic climate is such that we do attract the best migrants who will contribute to our economy. Because in the near future, when other nations such as South Korea, such as Japan, begin to open their doors and actively headhunt the best migrants, the nations who do not take steps to have control of their borders now will find themselves increasingly saddled with the migrants that are a drain on the economy, while simultaneously losing out on the migrants that they need in order for their economies to grow. Depopulation is a serious threat. It's one of the greatest threats of all. And although many of you, or many of the conspiracy theorists, will have you believe that the elite want to depopulate the world and want to rid everybody, on the contrary, the elite, the corporations, the governments, they are only concerned with the bottom line, and the bottom line to them is GDP. In a world of less, things will change, and they will not change for the better, because when corporations and governments have to face the prospect of an end to growth, then the strategy will probably, more than likely, change to one of consolidation and feudalism and retaining what they already have. So perhaps if we were to look at things from that perspective, it may well be that none of us really want to live in a world of less. Hopefully that will put a different perspective on things. Might be food for thought. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Agree, disagree. If you wish to insult me, well, many of you do, always welcome. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye for now.